Today, we will have a discussion on careers in mathematical sciences because that is one of the questions that parents and students ask us all the time. And what essentially we will do today is that we will give you some tools, some data and some resources that you can actually use and directly apply in your academic pathway. So in the first half an hour or so, I'll be going through a presentation that will have those data points, those resources, and some of the ideas that I have, some of the things that I have learned. I've been training students for about 15 years now for Mathematical Olympiads, research in school and universities. So I'll share with you what I have learned. And of course, it's still evolving. So I keep on learning every day. There are really like two pathways of career options in mathematical science. One is in academia, and one is in industry. We will talk a little bit more about academia because that's usually where all the students start. But eventually, we'll also talk a little bit about how it goes in the industry and what tools and what resources you may use in 2024, given that we are also going through a so-called artificial intelligence revolution. And some people are calling this the fourth industrial revolution. So many interesting things are happening. We can take advantage of them if we are aware how to use them. I'll talk about that a little bit as well. So if you are in academia, there are really a couple of things that people usually do. They teach at universities or schools or colleges, and they do research. Now, sometimes that research also creates some industry-facing activities. That happens all the time. There are collaborations with academia and industry. So it's not like you are talking about teaching and you're talking about research. I want to give you a little bit of data about this. And so if you're thinking about pursuing academic career, really you should be thinking about doing a PhD in the long run. And that PhD program usually goes on for like 4 years or 5 years, depending on what topic you are doing your PhD on. Some of my friends actually took about 7 to 8 years to complete their PhD. Usually, if you are working on a project, you have to, get it published somewhere or have some significant result before you were awarded a PhD degree. Then there are not too many PhDs in the sense that if you look at the data in 2022, and this is from the United States labor market data, there were about 2,000 people who were awarded a PhD degree in 2022. And the number was actually half of that in 1992, that is 20 years before to 2022. So in 20 years, the number of PhDs that are produced is doubled. Half of this is in statistics and applied mathematics. So 2,200 people gets a PhD every year from the United States in maths and stats. Now, if you go into computer science, so I'll be talking about mathematics, statistics, computer science, and physics, because these are the 4 things at Cheenta we have programs on, and we focus on these 4 areas. So in computer science, the number is quite similar. Around 2,500 people got a PhD in computer science and information systems in 2022. And there is a little bit of a bump, as you can see, from 2017 to 2022, there is like a jump. And that's kind of expected because a lot of people are actually doing research on deep learning, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and stuff like that. These are relatively new burst fields, but take a pinch of salt when you say that line, because artificial intelligence is actually a very old field, like 50, 60 years of history. But recently it got a little bit of marketing push, I guess. But around 2,500 people does PhD in 2022 in computer sciences and information systems and so on. And the numbers are quite similar in physics. Around 2,500 people does a PhD in physics. Again, not a huge number, but if you look at the data carefully, you will basically realize that around 7,000 to 8,000 people are actually engaged in a PhD program. They get a PhD degree every year. And if we extrapolate the 5 to 10 years from now, we can expect about 12,000 PhDs being churned out every year. So the reason I'm so fixating on this data is because this will actually give you a sense what kind of competition you will be facing. Not everyone wants to do a PhD, and that's absolutely fine. But if you are interested in an academic career, that is pretty much a gold standard right now. So you have to do a PhD and even a postdoc after that. So I'll come to that later. But around 4,000 people doing PhD in mathematics, statistics, 4,000 in CS, and 4,000 in physics and astronomy and so on. So 12,000 people, 5 to 10 years from now, that's sort of the place you will be in if you are preparing now, if you are right now in school. And that's not a very bad number, actually. And this is just in the United States. Of course, if you look at European Union or Australia or India, India has some extremely good schools, very nice universities. So they also churn out similar numbers of PhDs every year. But you have to be very careful because some in Indian universities, the quality is not really that high. So we have to be careful about that. Some of them are really good. For example, IISc Bangalore is a fantastic place. So if you are thinking about going into academics, then basically you have to first secure a spot in these 10 to 12,000 people 5 to 10 years from now. If you are in school, that's sort of the game. The number game is there. So keeping that in, let's talk about the general path that our students at Cheenta have taken for building a PhD or from the school days. So we actually take a very long-term vision for our students because we usually work with them for multiple years. It's not only just a mathematics program or a physics program or a computer science program. We tend to, work for a long time because some of them actually come back to Cheenta and teach and so on and so forth. So I'll describe you the general path that I have seen the students taking, and I'll also share with you what works and what may not work that much. So the first step is, and I'm still focusing on academia, the first step is to get an awesome undergraduate program. And that is basically a BSc or a BS, Bachelor of Science, BTech, maybe if you are going to engineering. But we are focusing on mathematical sciences, pure sciences. So maybe a BSc program or bachelor's program. And it's extremely important to get a really good undergraduate program for a couple of reasons. The first reason is if you want to do a really good PhD, then you will need a very good undergraduate level training, B, excellent recommendation letters. Now, how do you get excellent recommendation letters? If you ask, let's say, the governor of your state to write maybe you know that person, and write a recommendation letter for you, that actually may not fly. What you have to focus on, those rankings are mostly not created by universities themselves. They're created by private organizations. So those do not carry that much value. What actually carries value is something called the Carnegie system. So there are something called R1 universities, and I might get the spelling wrong. I have to check that. So basically there is something called a Carnegie system of rankings in some sense, and that basically categorizes the American universities into 2-3 categories. The first category, the R1 category, is basically what you have to look out for. So R1 category means very high research intensity. So it would be really awesome if you are going for an undergraduate program where the professor who is teaching you is from an R1 university and has some publications. That actually adds a lot of value to your CV or to your application during the PhDs. So you have to keep that in mind. India, not many places in India has that kind of professors, but if you can, definitely go for them. I'll talk about some of the places which are really good. You can definitely look at that. So that's the main thing. You have to work really hard during your undergraduate days, impress the professor, and get a really good recommendation letter, because it is one of the most important components for your PhD applications. Okay, the second is the step 1A of sorts. Is a master's program is not necessary for applying to PhD. So that is a common misconception among students. You don't really need to have a master's. Remember, the master's program is actually quite different from an academic pathway program. Master's means, usually it means that you gain a specific expertise, and which can be industry focused. And that's all right. If you want, you can get a master's, but if you do the undergraduate level really well, then you might be able to skip the master's and directly apply for PhD. So that's step 1A. I'll talk more about that. The third step, or the second step, step 2, is before you apply for PhD, you build a portfolio of research projects and teaching related internships. So this is something you have to understand, that if you're applying for PhD in Europe, or not as much as in Europe, but in United States, the main thing that they're looking for is, well, people who will be successful in a PhD program, of course, who will be able to do great research. But apart from that, people who could be great teachers as well, because a lot of undergraduate level programs in the US universities are taught by PhD level students, like graduate students. So they want someone who has some sort of a teaching experience, and that's very important. So what we suggest our students, and we regularly put students in some of the best universities in United States. This year also we have kids going to Stanford, and I think University of Boston, UIUC, several universities are there. But the point is that what we always suggest our kids, our students, is that do a fantastic research project whenever you're both in school and in college, especially in college. And second, get a teaching experience. So some of these people are actually teaching at Cheenta for quite a long time, because once you get a national level math Olympiad credential, then you are one of the best in the business. So we readily absorb them and we let them teach. So that is a great experience. But even if you're not teaching at Cheenta, teach someone else. And when you teach, you have to document what you are teaching. So I will speak more on that, because all of those things will be a part of your portfolio that will be the application that we'll be sending to the universities. So the application packet will contain all of those things. So that's step 2. And the third step is, of course, to choose a great PhD program, which is obviously dependent on the previous steps. So let's talk a little bit more about the first step, preparing for the undergraduate program. Now, if you are going to a counselor in your school days, not all of them, but some of them will actually tell you to build a portfolio or build a profile. I think that is a very wrong way of thinking about it. And I might be biased because the students who come to Cheenta are really motivated, and they're really trying to learn, and they're not trying to take shortcuts. So I'm a bit biased about it. And also, when you are in school, I think stuff which are frivolous in nature, like building cosmetic profiles, that I think it does a long-term damage for the ethical standards of the student. If you try to make profile around yourself, that might get you into an university, but life is much bigger than just an university application. So that I've been doing this for so long, like 14-15 years. I've seen what happens after universities, and some of these kids lives to fall apart. So I would rather suggest, instead of building a profile, try thinking about building an experience for the child, because it's all about when he or she is in school, focus on building experiences for the child. That would be significantly better. And I'll give you some tools. I'll talk about some tools that can really help in that process. The first thing that I really suggest is the Mathematical Olympiads. And again, it's not as much about the certification of Olympiad or stamp of Olympiad. It's partly about that, because if you do it right, it really helps a lot. But most students actually do it quite wrong. If you see, especially in the last 3-4 years, what I'm noticing is that everyone is doing 10,000 different Olympiads, and all the alphabets of the English language are in their Olympiad name list. It's a complete waste of time. It distracts the students. Actually, from these private Olympiads, they're getting gold and silver, this certificate, that certificate. They create a false expectations for themselves. So what at Cheenta we suggest, that totally cut that bullshit off from your life. You don't need that. You don't need 10,000 different Olympiads. But what you really need is to focus on 1 or 2 great contests, which will have an impact on your academic career in the long run. But more importantly, which will inspire you to think out of the box. That was the actual goal of creating the Olympiads in the first place. And if you are in other countries like Canada, or United Kingdom, or Australia, or Singapore, then you should. There is a very simple method, and look at the contest that they are creating. Just that one contest, will be sufficient. Remove everything else from your radar. Those are not even practice. Some parents are of the misconception that, okay, maybe they're not real, maybe they're not official, but maybe that's a practice. No, they're not. If you want to practice swimming and if you're playing guitar, that's not a practice for swimming, right? A completely different set of self-expectations. Many of these kids actually come to us after getting a national rank of 3, a gold or whatever it is, I don't know, and they are prodigies in grade 3. They can do grade 10 problems or whatever it is, and then they actually face the actual problems, and they have a sort of a nervous breakdown of sorts, because they see that these are world apart. And not only that, they have not learned how to learn as well. These problems, which are usually posed in private Olympiads, they are formula oriented in nature. So the kids have learned to remember the formulas and then apply them to click open the problems. But the actual Olympiads want you to do something completely different. They want you to meditate on a problem for a long amount of time. So it's not only that they are not practiced, they are actually teaching or provoking a wrong way to learn mathematical sciences. So that's an issue. So I would strongly suggest that you focus on only 1 or 2 or 3 things, 1 or 2 or 3 contests which are really special. And if you are an internal student of Cheenta, you can obviously contact your admin and verify whether you want to take a certain contest or not. The second thing that we often recommend is a research project. Now, there is a very big scam going on these days in terms of research projects. You will often see that some kids are publishing their material in some journal, high school level journal, and that journal is probably charging like $400 or $1,000, or I don't know what the amount is. It differs from journal to journal, and children and their parents are easily falling prey to this sort of scam. So this year only, I'll give you one example. This year only, we had a kid who from India, state of India. She was working with us on an Olympiad program for American math competitions, and then she switched to now the research project that she did. She wrote a paper. She did not publish in any of the high school level journals, but she sent it as an additional material for her university applications, and also talked about that in her statement of purpose. So when you're applying for American universities, you have to write a statement of purpose, which is a sort of an essay describing what you want to do and why you are applying and stuff like that. So she did really well, and she didn't have to go through the bullshit of journal publication. It does look like that you are sort of prepping your child to fail in the long run to make him or her successful in the short run. When you are going for these sort of scams, that you publish your paper in lieu of some money in some so-called journal, and the kid is like very happy that my paper is published. And maybe the university can be a bit naive. Some admission committees are, but they're catching up to it. They are not that naive anymore. That okay, so don't do that. You don't need your research projects to be published. Really, if you can publish it in some very good journal, that's great. Even if you can't, that's also fine, provided you do 2 things. The first thing is you demonstrate you worked hard to honestly learn something substantial. So this kid about whom I was talking about like a few minutes ago, she worked on something called hyperbolic geometry that is not taught in schools. So she had to learn all of that. It took a lot of time, like 6, 7, 8 months. Once she did that, once she gained the domain expertise, then she went on to be a bit creative about the application of that domain knowledge. Those are the only 2 things that are expected. Number 1 is domain expertise, that you have worked really hard to learn something. So now learn something deep. You're doing, and then now it is more like weird, like people are just using ChatGPT and they're just assembling charts and numbers, and they're just creating something that looks like paper. So that's actually a good news for people who are ready to work honestly, because there will be more bullshit in the market. So if you do work honestly, that will stand out almost. Who is this? Santosh. There is someone who is muting me. I think it's kind of one second. What's going on? I see there is an option to mute me, right? Just a second. Let me one thing. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, so yeah, that's about the research project. The third thing is about, so not everyone needs to do a research project. So several people are actually doing product development. So they build physical products which are usually technology based, but they could be like virtual products as well, like an application or something. But more often they're building physical products. So one of the kids and one faculty at Cheenta is building like a blind person's smart stick. So there are many smart sticks available, which basically does something very simple. When you walk with that stick, they would actually use an ultrasonic wave in front of you, and then it will alert the user if there is an obstacle. But now with the advent of AI, what they're trying to do, our team is trying to do, is that they also want to add some computer vision modules to that entire product, and that would also study the contour of the plane around the blind person and also give more nuanced alerts. Just one idea. There are many such ideas we are working on. So some kids, so it depends on the kid actually. Some kids are interested in abstract research projects, which usually results in a paper. Some kids are interested to build products, and maybe they market those products as well. The fourth thing is really community engagement, which is also extremely important for the child actually. Of course, it also looks really good in the CV. That's something that universities want. But I will tell you this, that once the kid goes into the university or even after that, what is it that will keep the child grounded and moving through tough times? I mean, this has happened with many of my students. Brilliant students did wonderfully in school, then went to university and sort of, several life happened and the kids wavered a little bit. So how do they keep themselves grounded in those moments of difficulty? And they will come. They will definitely come. So what I have seen is that if a child is actually, engaged in some sort of a community project that is tied to a greater cause, then that child usually stays grounded even in the long run. And it's very hard to, damage that, but it's very hard for life to damage that kind of a child. So not only again, as I'm telling you, that it's not only for building a profile. That's a very wrong way to look at it. You're actually building a life. And it's extremely important to do that at an early age. Several kids at Cheenta are actually teaching rural kids from ones in West Bengal. We have this math circle project where they meet. So these are kids from 6th, 7th, 8th grades. They start teaching, they document it. There are beautiful diaries on math circles that they produce. And they discuss beautiful problems with these kids from rural Bengal. And that experience is actually transformative, both for the child at Cheenta as well as the kid who is sitting thousands of miles away. So you can also create something around your child in your locality. If it's physically, like if it's happening at a physical proximity, that's even better. So these are the four components of the pre-college experience: Olympiads, research projects, products, and community engagements. Of course, no one needs to do all of them, but if you can, that's great. If you don't want to do some of these things, that's also fine. But focus on one or two things that really matters. Don't do 10,000 so-called Olympiads that might actually hurt you, not help you. And don't do fake research projects. Okay, so proceeding, undergraduate programs in India, there are quite a few great undergraduate programs in India. If you are in US, of course, again, as I told you a few moments ago, go to the Carnegie R1 list and check for the R1 universities. Any of them is good. But in India, if you are looking at India, the number of institutions are like smaller in nature, great institutions in that sense. The two of the most important institutes are ISI, Indian Statistical Institute, and Chennai Mathematical Institute, CMI. These have their own entrances, which happen after high school, and they are only math focused. And these are very similar to Math Olympiads as well, the entrances. There are not a lot of seats actually. There are, I think, 100 to 200 seats at best. So ISI has both three programs: statistics, mathematics, and data science. CMI has one program, which is a double major: math and computer science, physics and mathematics. So you can choose from that. Then we have the Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research. There are 5 of them. They have their own entrance test called IAT, ISER aptitude test. But those actually cover all four parts, like mathematics, physics, computer, chemistry, and biology. So you have to do all four of them to do well in IIT. There is NISER, National Institute of Science Education and Research. University of Hyderabad is also pretty good for mathematics. And there are some really good schools which actually allow students to come through IIT JEE. Like ISI Bangalore is there, IIT Kanpur is a fantastic place to do mathematics. All of these are through IIT JEE. And even after these come the tier 1 colleges in India, like RKMVU, Presidency University, Xavier's, Loyola College, Chennai, St. Stephen's, Hindu University, and so on. So any of these places will be pretty good. They will have great professors. As I told you, your main goal is to do really well in your undergraduate years so that you get a great recommendation letter. You will need 3 recommendation letters. So try getting a couple of them from college and maybe one from the place where you have taught during your college days or during your school days. As I told you, teaching experience also matters quite a bit. Okay, so now about masters, you can skip it if you are planning for a PhD. Do really well in your undergraduate days. Or if you want to do it and go into industry, you can also do that. So for example, ISI, Indian Statistical Institute, has a great MStat program, which is absolutely awesome for industry-facing jobs. So that you can do. There is MSQE, there are QROR, there are several programs in ISI which are industry-facing. Similarly, there are also programs in other universities in India and in the United States and in Europe which are industry-facing. If you have a very good undergraduate program in mathematics, you will be eligible for all of them, and you will be in a very good position to actually write the entrances of all of them. One thing I always suggest the students is to gain a special application of whatever they have learned during their master's program. That adds a lot of value if you are going for a PhD program later on. Now, I have already talked about building a portfolio during PhD. I'll give you one example. There is this kid from West Bengal who was doing a research project for over a year with us, and he worked on. He did not do a bachelor's or undergraduate program from a very good university. He did not discover anything, but he created an expository paper on an advanced idea from geometric group theory, which is really nice, and it worked out well. He got a which is of course what you want. But again, as I told you, teach, and while you teach, create detailed lecture notes so that you can use those as an additional material in application kit, and also do a great research project during your undergraduate or master's phase. Or if you want to take a break here, you can do that. That's also sometimes something that people do before applying to PhD. So now let's talk a little bit about industry. There are plenty of things that mathematicians do apart from teaching and researching in universities. You can do business consultancy, actuarial science is one way, astronomy, data analysis is definitely the thing of the day, investment analysis. Many mathematicians actually go into software engineering. They work as statisticians in companies. So there are plenty of things that mathematicians do apart from teaching and doing research at universities. So if you're interested in that, you can definitely explore that. I give you an interesting fact. There is a growth forecast from Occupational Outlook Handbook of United States Labor Bureau that mathematical sciences employment are expected to grow at 26% CAGR, which is much faster than average of all other occupations. This is through 2028. So usually they're quite right about these sort of predictions. And if you are studying mathematics and if you don't want to do like teaching or research or something like that, you can always go for industry jobs. Mathematicians, especially after this sort of AI revolution, mathematicians are actually very well positioned to do all sorts of things in industry. So definitely go for that. Not everyone needs to teach. Some people want to do other kinds of stuff. That's totally fine. That's actually great. And if you think that that's what you are, then you can try out these additional things that can really help you in the long run. So there are really 3 things that I want to talk about in this particular step: certifications, diplomas, and an online degree, which is like a second degree that you may have at the undergraduate level. So I'll give you an example, like IIT Madras in India. It offers a Bachelor of Science degree in data science, and there is no entrance of that. There is an aptitude test for that, but there is no entrance of that. So anyone can go and take it. It's an online degree. Many of the students of Cheenta are taking it as a second degree, so that happens all the time, and it can really add value to your career. And similar things are actually offered by many other universities in Europe as well. I'll give you two examples. University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. That's a very good university. Ohio State University is another one, who offer online undergraduate level degrees, which are perfectly good and excellent additions to your career, especially if you are looking for industry facing stuff. That's the first thing, online degrees. Take a look at the second degree option. That might really help. The second thing is certifications. So there are certain certificates by companies like Google or Amazon that can really add value to your entire career. So in your undergraduate days, you can do stuff like Google Cloud, Professional Cloud Architect certification, or Professional Data Engineer certifications. They are very highly valued, and you can definitely add them as well. And being a mathematics major or computer science major will only add value to that. And finally comes the diplomas. I'll give you one example. There is something called Chartered Financial Analysis. So basically there are diplomas are like this, that there is one from Actuarial Science, the Institute of Actuarial Science as well. What they do is they have a sequence of exams that you can take. And once you take each exam, you are sort of, it's like a game. You cross a level, you are leveling up. And usually after third or fourth level, you are already industry ready. People are already trying to hire you because they are so well coveted places for diplomas. So look out for them. Chartered Financial Analyst is one. Actuarial Science is another spot where you can use this sort of stuff. So certifications, diplomas, or online degrees, these are three things that can be industry facing and really helpful in the long run. You can talk to me later if you want, and I can share with you whatever I know. And finally, I will just end this discussion, like my part of the discussion, with one single thing, that if you don't remember any other thing from this discussion, I'll just tell you one thing that is absolutely necessary, especially in this day of, I call it abundance of information. There is so much information out there, so many books, ChatGPT, large language models are coming in. There are online courses. There are so many things happening. One of the major challenge of you as a student or a parent is to navigate through all of these overflow of data and focus on exactly what is absolutely necessary. And what we have found is that going to 20 different places and nibbling through different stuff can only negatively impact you. So here is a little rule of the thumb. And this is something that we absolutely focus at Cheenta. Complete one book from cover to cover before you go to any other resources, online, YouTube video, etc. Don't go anywhere else. You have to play the game in a very different way if you want to really learn something. So here is the simplest trick, the oldest trick in some way, a very old trick in some sense. Take one book, one really good book, complete it from cover to cover, all problems. Do not post the problems online and check the solutions. Do not try to, get an answer from ChatGPT or anything. Try the problems on your own. Don't go to 10 different books. One book, cover to cover, then proceed to other resources. Try doing this for a year and you will see a transformation yourself. You will be a calmer person in that sense. So I have some book suggestions. This is for grades 7 to 8. Even a 6th grader can use this, or a 9th grader can use this. You can take a screenshot of this if you want. That's fine. And I will also post the PPT in our website, so you can check that out there. And finally, the books for grades 9 and above. Okay, so that's about it. And let's now open the floor for questions. So if you have any question, please raise your hand. There is a raise hand tool in Google Meet, and you can raise your hand. You can ask a question if you want.